How are
Oh,
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Um, I did a couple of new settings in Zoom. It was supposed to ask your permission for recording. Did you see?
Uh-huh.
You did. Okay, perfect. All right. Um, so thank you again for meeting with me a second time and talking about deconstruction. And last time, we got into kind of the big picture story of your history as a Christian and your church experiences um, and I remember you saying that you kind of started from a more conservative evangelical type scene in the church to pretty charismatic and
Right.
very grace focused. Um, and it was a big change for you. Um, I wanted to ask you because I don't think I got a chance to ask you last time, but as far as a term deconstruction, what how do you think you would define that term? What do you think about that term?
I think it means um, taking a really close look at your foundational belief system
Hmm.
and um, and no longer being able to align your who you really are to some of those things,
Hmm.
and then navigating changing those things or um, figuring out if it's not that, then what is it?
Hmm.
What do I really believe, and what am I able to um, authentically align myself with?
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's really good. And I ask because I feel like there's so many um, things that people attach to the word deconstruction. And I've
Yeah.
spoken to many people that don't even like to use that term because they associate it with, certain things. So I'm just
I've
trying.
seen that.
Yeah, yeah, right. So which is fine, but in doing these interviews, I'm trying to get a full picture of what things people attach to the word deconstruction and kind of where they're coming from with it. Whether it's positive, where they, view it as a positive thing or a negative thing or somewhere in between. Um, Me personally, I think it is somewhere in between because there were a lot of positive things about it, and I think overall it's positive, but there are some negative things about it too. So, experientially anyway. So
Mhm.
as far as um, your deconstruction, last time we were kind of discussing how in your particular situation, your deconstruction happened over kind of a long period of time. It wasn't condensed into like, really short time. It was over a long period of time. Um,
Yeah.
would you say that that's accurate?
um, I feel as though my life has just been like a series of moving from one thing to the next, which is really funny because I've had I've had people actually say that like I have an orphan spirit or things like that, and I think it's not necessarily because I can't connect or even like can't commit. I think it's just what I describe deconstruction to be. It becomes a place where I can no longer align myself with what is there. And so it's not that I don't love the people. It's not that, we've had a falling out. It's just that I want to be with like minded people. I want to be with people who have the same goals and the same passions. And it's not that I can't be with anyone else. It's not like, oh, you have to be like me to be in my circle. It's not that at all. It's just that as I'm trying to figure out, what it looks like to walk in the things that I feel called to, I want to follow those that have already been here. And so, and I think there's wisdom in that, and there's really good counsel in that. So a lot of times people that have been where in a situation like I have where they've kind of gone from thing to thing or maybe even like done a lot of church hopping, which I haven't actually done that, but people see them as being really flaky or like
That is a
they,
general sentiment
yeah.
on that. Yeah, unfortunately.
So, and I think there was probably a time when I cared about, you know, I cared about what it looked like. And so I know for a fact I've stayed places longer than I should have because of how it would have looked to leave. So
Yeah, I think we've all been there, you know.
crazy the things we put ourselves through.
Right, right. And I mean, I think it's natural for humans to care what people think, and I think it's also very natural for us to gravitate towards like-minded individuals. You know, we're innately wired to want to feel like we belong and that we're accepted, and of course, that's always easier when we're kind of tribing with people that, share our beliefs and our views on things. And, I think the key is being open to obviously the differences that other people hold. Like you said, you're not like blocking anybody out of your
Right.
tribe. It's just you have very specific goals too. And like we were talking about last time, you have not had an easy time of it because of how the church generally views the topic of immigration, and then there's racism and just all of these different things that.
Yeah, God gave me all the really touchy stuff. That's
Shoot,
fun.
yeah. Seriously, I mean,
Thanks.
it's not easy. It's not easy. So you have a lot to navigate with that, and
Yeah.
it's a touchy topic for a lot of people. So in fact, I want to talk about that a little bit more because we started kind of toward the end of the call last time and didn't get to finish. But specifically related to the things that you're doing with immigration and even racism, what has been your deconstruction experience as far as God, what you thought, or how you view? Let me word this correctly. How you think God views those things, how
Mhm.
you think scripture views those things, compared to maybe what you believed before or what you think is mainstream beliefs. And I know it's kind of a big question. Um,
No, it's a good question.
yeah.
Um, I so when we went to the border, we heard a message that was given by the director of the program there, who's also a pastor, and she basically offered us a new lens by saying, like, as I share these things with you, imagine being the person who's marginalized in the story, because most of the time people that grow up in privilege always see themselves as the person with the upper hand in the story because that's who we relate to the most. And so that was kind of like the open door to me thinking, like, gosh, I never even realized that there was another way to look at it,
Hmm.
you know? Um,
And that in and of itself is so powerful.
yeah, it's crazy. Um, and I've gotten myself in trouble here and there. Like for instance, the Super Bowl, the whole halftime show. I said, you know, from what I've observed of both of these women's lives, they did not have a meeting and decide we're going to stir everybody up to promote human trafficking. you know, Like, that's just not what happened. They were invited to do that show probably a year before it happened,
Hmm.
and they saw it as an opportunity to share their cultures. And most of the people that I know that are from both of their cultures were very proud of the performance. Um, and so my point was, can we step away from being offended long enough to say what was the intention? And I got a lot of pushback for even saying that.
I think I
Um,
remember that
yeah, I
on
had
Facebook.
people telling me I needed to get into my Bible, and I
Right.
was way out there, and I was just kind of like, and I think that I look at people like John Crowder, who goes into like, these bars in like Singapore and talks to these like, what do they call them? Lady boys.
Oh, I'm not sure
You
what
know
the
what I'm talking about?
is, but I
So
know.
it's technically trans
Mm-hmm.
young adults who are prostituting themselves in these bars, and that's who he is supposed to be ministering to. So
Yeah.
he goes to where they are, and I mean, I don't know a whole lot of Christians who would be willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about, how God, not only does he give us, I guess, the measure of grace, or the lens that we need to be able to see those people as he sees them,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can minister, from a loving place, and really see their worth. Because it's funny, it's not the world that would tell us that they're worthless, it's actually the church, um,
Well,
which is so, upside down.
mm-hmm.
But I also think that, I had said to you that I can see through the course of my life all of the different things that God has used to prepare me, things that didn't make sense while they were going on, but now I understand, even down to like personal issues of feeling really hurt myself over things, and feeling, um, left out of things, or feeling rejected, or whatever. It's like, God, of course, those things don't shake him. He's the healer. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, like, I mean, he cares about them, and he doesn't want us to like stay in this wounded state.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, he knows he can handle it. And so I truly believe that we walk through a lot of that stuff to develop empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that, sometimes the people that we are called to love have experienced those things at such a deeper level than we'll ever know.
Right.
So but at least we have a starting point, something where we can connect and say, I haven't been through that, but I've been through something similar, and it was very painful.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, and that's so important, for connection,
right.
Um, and I so feel that. And going back to what you were saying about trans and how you don't think that many Christians would be willing to do that. And, thinking about, because this is, it's definitely a really big topic in Christianity about homosexuality and how that's viewed in the church as a sin. And, um, the scriptures in the Bible that people point to support that. It kind of these topics kind of go hand in hand with the topics of racism, and immigration, even just kind of putting a group of people in, you know, just separate and labeling them,
Right.
in a way that is not loving and inclusive. So tell me, do you find that people come at you with certain scriptures in relation to what you're doing specifically? Like, I really don't support this because I know we talked about how there's a political angle to it, and it's like this overarching thing. The church kind of holds to this political belief system, and it happens to fall in that system, and so it gets kind of lumped in with that, right?
It is. It's weird. It's like this weird mesh of empire and kingdom.
Yeah, yeah, it is weird. Um, and I could see how, like, if you're supposed to have this view over here, if you're a Christian, then all of these other things can get attached to it. And we I think as humans we tend to be pretty binary in our thinking. We
Yeah.
maybe without even trying, it's almost like that's our default setting. It's like it's got to be this way or that way, and you got to put this in this silo and this in this silo. Um, but when we start to break that down, as we started to discuss last time, there's a whole gradient of thought, and we don't have to put ourselves or anybody else in this neatly wrapped box of like, okay, well, if you're a Republican, then you have to. agree with all of these different things that Republicans are supposed to agree with, and the same thing with Democrats. Um, so, we can do that. We can make those powerful choices, right?
Yes.
But why is it so hard?
I honestly think it all comes down to fear, because people need to know, like, there people that love black and white are so afraid of what it looks like to not have black and white. It's like, well, then what does that mean for this or that? And it's just like, Christians who want the wrath of God. It's like, so you understand that in order for you to be part of the kingdom, there had to be this measure of grace that covered you. And yet you feel like there should be a limit to that, and that on the other side of that somewhere it stops being restorative and now it's punitive.
Right, right,
And it's
exactly.
like, so yeah, and so it's like, so why would you even want that? Like, if you've experienced the grace that got you to where you are, and you truly understand um, just how amazing that is, like, why would you ever not want it for someone else?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And, as a recovering black and white person that I was for many, many years, and you could ask, a lot of our mutual friends who've known me for a long time, they'll tell you that I was very black and white. And I still am on certain things. I have to grow in that, as we all do. But um, just coming from that train of thought, and believing too in the wrath of God, and the fact that the people that did not believe while they were alive on earth, that is what was waiting for them. And I think you're absolutely right when you say that there is fear. There's fear that, of the uncertainty. There's fear of, not fitting in a category and having it all figured out. Because, well, then what does it look like, and what is the truth, and what should I believe if I don't believe this anymore, and I'm drifting away from the mainstream belief? Is that dangerous, and where is that going to lead me? So
Right.
there's like all of these other questions that start coming up, and there is a lot of fear to that, because I experienced it. And I think, touching on what you said about, why would people want that if they've experienced the grace of God? Why would they want anyone to experience anything less? And I think as humans, we and I've done this myself. We almost like toggle back and forth with, the flesh part of us, wanting vindication for things, especially when there's personal hurt, and wanting to know that there's this justice. Like, we have this idea of justice that, well, what if they don't change? What if they don't get restored by love? What, they're just going to get away with it? And we just, this vindication kind of rises up in us. Um, but I think deep down we all yearn and to see someone restored and healed. That, of course, is the better option.
Right.
And I tend to think, now leaning towards, what if we're face to face with God, in the afterlife after we leave here, and let's say we weren't restored, and let's say we were awful to people and never chose Christ, and we did some pretty bad stuff, and we're face to face with God. Like, I'm thinking that it's still going to be restorative. I'm thinking we're going to be face to face with grace and love, and all of that stuff that kept us in the deception, um, and the sin of that will just kind of be melted away, like,
Yeah.
just stripped away, because it wasn't really us anyway.
Exactly.
There was stuff attached to us that made us do those things from that place. And face to face with God, that gets stripped away, and the real us is revealed. That's what I'd like to think anyway. I might feel differently next week.
I know. I know. It's so funny because I think the phrase that I've said the most in this season is, I haven't really landed anywhere on that yet.
I've said those exact words too. It's like, I just don't know about that. I don't know. And I might not know for a long time or ever know, but that's okay, right? And that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's being okay with not having it all figured out. not being afraid of that.
And I have to say that I am enjoying the freedom that allows me to entertain more than one thing,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. How has that freedom, do you think, changed your life and the quality of your life?
I well, there's so much stress that comes with the black and white
Hmm.
because because you set your expectations based on that. And so everyone who doesn't measure up to what you're expecting is either a disappointment or wrong, or, um, you may even be willing to let them go because, I can remember when I was first in the campus ministry, I had friends that I used to party with and drink with, and they were at University of Delaware. And so we had Tuesday nights, I think, was when we did the Bible study at the student center, and they were very close to there. So after Bible study, I would walk over and visit with them a little bit. And there was probably a period of maybe 2 months where I didn't go and hang out with them at all because I was trying to figure out um, who I was and what God wanted for me. And I needed to kind of separate myself from the partying scene because I was feeling convicted about it.
Right.
And I still, would call them and talk to them and stuff. I just didn't hang out with them as much. And I can remember one of them saying, "You dissed us for Jesus." And I was like,
Wow.
"Yeah, but," I was like, "But if I'm gonna diss you for somebody, like,
You're like, you're not wrong.
it's Jesus."
And I mean, yeah, it's Jesus Christ. So there's that.
So yeah, and they were just like, "I don't know, this is so weird, you become this other person." And so so then I did start spending time with them, and I had come to a point where I had made enough decisions and was sure enough, like I had a little more footing, and I was able to be around that stuff but not participate. Um, and I did that for a while. Unfortunately, one of the guys from that period got really bad into drugs at some point, and um, as an adult, after he had had a child that was like 3 years old, he got pulled over by the police in Philadelphia, and he had drugs on him, and he tried to swallow the drugs in the plastic bag, and he suffocated.
Oh my God.
So
Wow.
I look back at,
Mhm.
I just look back and think about our choices, and not that I'm judging him for his, but it's so funny. He actually went to Liberty. So like he had been raised in a Christian home, and you know so anyway, but it was really funny because as I was, kind of taking, like, veering to one side, he was probably the one that gave me more pushback than anybody else. But at the same time, there were times when we would have conversations and I could tell that he completely related to what I was saying and understood it, and maybe even like was a little sad that he wasn't there anymore, like, because of course he had been taught too that he was bad now,
Yeah.
and he would have to give up everything to come back. So, and that was hard. Drugs are really hard to kick. So,
Hmm.
and that's the whole thing with the way that I was raised in the churches that I was in, and that whole thing hanging over you of like the being backslidden thing is because people people that just want to reconnect with God don't need to have 27 steps to do it. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, that's
Yeah.
not God requiring that of them.
But it's
So,
easier to have those rules, right? It's like you said, it's so easy. It's much easier to live in this, in a framework that you could understand that doesn't have, um, all of these complicated things. And it's when you start getting into, well, relationship without all of these requirements, relationships are messy, right?
yes.
So why would a relationship with God be any different, right? When we're trying to like figure stuff out.
It's
Um,
true.
you know,
And
I think
and
driven by laws, it's, easier.
the whole thing about fear and control that goes hand in hand with that is that I know for me, like, because I both of my parents were addicts,
Hmm.
there were a lot of things in my childhood that were out of control.
Okay.
And so I think that initially Christianity looked like something that had a lot of structure, which
Hmm.
I really was like longing for because I didn't have it. And I think probably it's because our security is based in that structure and not in our relationship with God.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. It feels really unsafe to leave that structure that you've known for so long. And I think, that has a lot to do with that chaotic feeling that people can go through during deconstruction,
Yeah,
because they're leaving this really secure, system that they've built. And it's not just any system. I mean, this is what people build their lives on. It's what I built my life on,
yeah,
in so many respects. And not that I didn't have a relationship with God, I did, but I had all of this extraneous stuff attached to God that all of a sudden I was finding, probably wasn't true and really didn't line up with how I felt God was as far as his character.
yeah,
So, that's a difficult thing to go through, and it can feel chaotic and unsafe,
yeah,
while you're going through it. So, I would say that's part of the negative, things that you experience. And then, as you touched on, some of the rejection that you could experience, from it. And, I think it's it's hard to for you were talking about backsliding, and even your friend who had, ultimately who died, and had a drug issue, but was kind of raised in the church and, coined as bad. I think people struggle with freedom too, because they don't know, um, how to deal with, you know, is it too much grace? How much freedom is too much freedom, to where it's dangerous freedom, and, it's going to get you in trouble freedom. What does the balance look like with that? Because, we could argue it's not that rules are bad. I mean, when I think about, um, and maybe it's better said as boundaries, I don't know. When I think about even showing up for a baseball game and playing a baseball game, if everybody shows up following the rules of the game, everyone has fun. But if everyone shows up and with their own ways of playing, it's kind of anarchy. So I think there's this fear where that's concerned too, and understanding what the balance of that is, and self-managing, because we've actually had the church managing us for so long, right? Like, we move into this place of like, okay, well, and I don't know how it is for everyone, but for me, it was like this radical shift. Like, okay, none of that's right. So how am I supposed to live right now? Like, what am I supposed to even do? I don't even know.
it's a
It's crazy.
scary place. But yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with thinking that you trust God when you really don't,
Okay.
because because when we put the type of trust in Him that's required to allow freedom, we do it knowing that it's going to be okay because He's got this.
Yeah.
And I think that you know, there's a billion reasons why people struggle with trust, but but I think the biggest thing is trusting Him for other people, because that's when I look on Facebook, and I see all the arguing and the back and forth. I see well intended people who maybe even love the person they're arguing with, but they aren't trusting that God is big enough in that person's life to correct what needs to be corrected, to, you know, shed truth where they might be believing a lie, to guide them, ultimately where they need to go, and even to like handle it if they get off track. Like, He's got all of that. And it's like I saw not too long ago, somebody said the only sin that's mentioned in the Bible is yours. It's not
Wow.
other people's.
Wow. I'll have to go back and look at that. That's
And I was
interesting.
just like, okay, so, and the whole like, log in your eye, splinter in someone else's eye thing. And it's like, there's, don't get me wrong, there's definitely a need for discipleship and accountability. And those things are wonderful when they're not abused. Um, but I feel like more times than not, they're abused. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people use it to micromanage other people. And it's sad because if it's done correctly, it should bring the person more freedom. It shouldn't put somebody under someone else's thumb, you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
I agree completely. That's really good.
yeah,
Trusting that God is going to bring them to, ultimately to truth, and, trusting that that's going to happen for everyone,
right.
and that we are, it's not on our shoulders to bring that person to that place, and wag our fingers at someone and say, well, that's not right. This is right. And, you know, um, I definitely did my fair share of that,
So did I.
definitely did my fair share of that. So I think I think there's so much merit to what you just said, and trusting God, is paramount in being able to be in that freedom and allow other people to be in freedom too.
That's what I'm like, we have to allow one another to walk in the freedom that Jesus died to give us.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. Yes, exactly.
we have to allow people to be free. It's,
Right.
he paid a big price for freedom,
Yes, he did. He did. I believe
and
that.
we don't have the right to take other people's freedom from them, even when we don't like what their lives look like.
Yes,
So,
exactly. I mean, there's choice, and choice doesn't, I mean, love doesn't exist without choice.
right.
Love lets, people make those decisions. And when they're, if they're bad decisions, they're bad decisions. We're there with open arms, when they're ready to be restored and healed, and, come back around. And even in the midst
Yeah.
of it.
It's so funny because if you think about throughout your life the times when you've made decisions that, that maybe they weren't like, you know, earth shattering bad, but maybe they affected a relationship you had, or maybe they, cost you something.
Hmm.
In those situations, you're already aware that you've messed up,
Yeah.
and you're already like kind of taking your own inventory and saying like, okay, so what do I have to adjust? What shouldn't I do again? This
Yeah.
didn't serve me very well, so obviously something has to change. And so to be then in the presence of people that are kicking you while you're down is like,
Horrible.
yeah, and it does, I just think it's very dishonoring,
Hmm.
you know? And then but when you experience people that say like, yeah, I saw where you were going, but it was your choice to make, and understanding that they allowed you the freedom to make the choice, like there's so much more honor in that than
Yeah.
someone trying to control you because they're trying to keep you from making the mistake.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said before, discipleship and accountability can come from a really healthy place, of not being rooted in fear and control, but being rooted in love, to say, hey, maybe you want to rethink that choice, but, whatever, like it's
Oh
your
yeah,
choice, you
like
know?
if someone has given you permission to speak into their life and they're saying like, this is what I want from you, I mean, you can't have discipleship without correction. It
Right, right.
doesn't work.
And permission, as you just pointed out.
Exactly. So it's like if if you've said, yes, I'm gonna submit myself, to your wisdom and to the things that you have to teach me and pour into me, then there's already an understanding that you're going to hear some things that you don't like. You're going to hear some things that are going to,
Challenge you.
yeah, that are going to be like, yeah, that one hurt, but that's how we grow. And so, the probably the best spiritual relationship I ever had was very intense with um, discipleship, but I was grateful. There were times when they would tell me I can remember. Okay, so I told you I came out of the punk thing,
Yes.
and I can remember going to a party that the church had. It was a big pool party, and something happened. I got into like a little tiff with somebody, and somebody brought the situation back to the people that were discipling me, and I was living in their house at the time. And so when we got home, I remember like they sat me down and they were like, "So we want to talk to you about this thing." And I remember just being like really indignant. I was right, the other person was wrong. And at the root of it, they were saying like, we just really feel that the root of this is like a um, an attention seeking thing. And I was like, what? But that was kind of always my initial reaction to the things that they would tell me. But they always gave me the freedom to walk away from the conversation, to pray about it myself. And then I would come back and say, so, I asked God to show me like where in my life these things were. And he showed me like this. Like,
Wow.
you know, so, and of course, once you've done that with somebody a few times, you begin to trust that they're hearing correctly. And you also realize that they're doing it because they love you and they're not beating you up. You know, they used to say, we're on your side against the sin in your life.
That's so good. That's so good.
And I was like, oh, okay, we're a team. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But initially I couldn't see that. And it was always a very, I had so much dysfunction in my life that whenever they would sit me down and like talk to me about something, I would just like sob the whole time
Mm.
because I had a dad that left. Like, I dealt with a lot of abandonment and rejection. And so anybody bringing me something like that felt so much like I'm bad. I'm bad, not what I did. I'm bad. And so I had to work through all that and get to the
Yeah.
other side of that. And so I think that, but they were very patient and they knew like what I had come out of. But I do remember the guy saying one time, I just don't understand why you always cry through these. This isn't emotional.
What? Oh my God.
This isn't emotional. This is just like, we're just having a conversation here. Like, I guess he just felt like I was over the top, like in my
Oh my
feelings,
goodness.
which I was, you know. But he was just very like matter of fact. And if someone had brought him the same information, he would have been like, oh, huh, okay.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Well, not everyone is the same as far as how they express themselves. So,
Yeah.
wow.
But
Wow.
so I think too, because, his heart towards me was not to upset me or, so he was kind of like, gosh, we tell you this and you've given us permission to do that. And then you like fall apart.
Right. Right. So maybe he was just concerned. He was like, are you okay? Am I like
I'm
hurting
sure.
you right now?
Right.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I can
So,
understand that. Well, that's, I mean, just incredible to hear all that and understand all that from your perspective. And, looking at the big picture of what we're seeing kind of on the macro scale with this. I mean, you and I are kind of in the same circles and on Facebook and social media, we follow a lot of the same people
right.
um, who often talk about deconstruction, maybe not using that term. Some of them do,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of content out there and a lot of people I think that are going through it or have gone through it. And what do you think about the big picture of where some people do call it a movement. you know um, what do you think the big picture is potentially where this is headed?
I feel like the church as a whole has been so inconsistent. Like we haven't had the unity factor. Excuse me, we haven't had like revival all at once. We haven't, um, as a whole, I don't think we're very good at loving people. And I say that not because obviously I don't like the church. I mean, it's funny because I actually remember I was saying something along these lines, and I was saying, sometimes I don't want to be called a Christian. Like there are times when I'll say I'm a believer, but I don't actually use the term Christian because it's been connected to so many negative things at this point.
Right.
And I remember somebody saying to me, "Huh, I love the church. I love the body of Christ. Like, I try to see it as he sees it, and he's like totally in love with the church and this and that." And I was like, I get that. And it's not that I don't love people. It's that on the bigger scale, I feel like I'm so aware of what's lacking, and so to me, I feel like the responsibility in that is that I'm praying that those things come. Um,
Those
and
changes.
also, I'm sorry.
You mean the changes?
Yeah,
Right.
like, that the church is able to love correctly, that the church is able to get healed where it's still wounded,
Mhm.
um, that the church is able to trust and not micromanage.
Right.
Like all of these
Breathe.
things. Yeah. So that she can operate the way that the kingdom actually operates. And I feel like I feel like I don't think it's this thing where like, oh, God's choosing, like there's special people that he's choosing to reveal these things to. I believe that he desires for all to understand those things. I say that, and then I also think that even in that's not 100% true, because I do believe that whatever we're called to, there are specific things that we have, or beliefs that we hold, you know, closer, that maybe somebody else doesn't really think a whole lot about, or whatever. I think that whatever the demographic is that he's assigned to you, he definitely equips you specifically for them. And I think that looks different for everyone. And so that's another area where we have to allow each other freedom.
Wow.
And that's hard. So it's like, for instance, I have friends that came out of the homosexual lifestyle, who are now, they do like the freedom march, and they're all about Jesus, and some of them have married and have kids now, and that is their ministry, and they are very black and white. But I believe, for them, because they believe that what they were um, in for so long was such a strong bondage, they feel like you have to either be on this side of it or be on this side of it. Like, there is no middle ground. You can't play with it.
Hmm.
You have to make a decision and be completely over here. And so even though when I hear them minister about it, it is
Hmm.
absolutely not the way I would minister to people, and I feel like it's very harsh.
Okay.
I believe that God uses it to reach people that need that particular type of ministry.
Right. That's
So
good.
I yeah, I can't say to them, you're not doing it right, because that's not my demographic, you know.
Right. Exactly. And the way that the message that we have to share, we all have messages that we share, and we know that it's going to reach a certain person where they're at in their walk.
Yes. Yeah.
So, right, who are we to judge to say, well, you can't say those things, um, or you can't, coin your message that way, because somebody can be, it could be life changing for someone in a good way, right?
And it's interesting because even in that setting, like there's one guy who he's now written a book, but before he had started a blog, and the very first time that he put his a blog post, he sent it to me before he went live with it, and he was like, I know that you have a really soft heart towards LGBTQ. And he was like, can you read this and tell me what you think before I put it up? And it was so good. It was just like amazing. I mean, and he came out of that. So I'm kind of like, why are you asking, my opinion? Like, how would you feel reading this, when you were still in it? But actually it was to the church, and it was talking about where they had fallen short, and like what that community needs from the church and how they haven't been getting it. And um
Wow, that must have been powerful.
but he did say it in a very gentle way.
Mhm.
But it was really, really good, and I was just like, wow, yeah, you nailed it. That was great. But then there's another person that's a part of that group, and seriously, like, I can't listen to him preach because he's so harsh. But again, he hasn't been a Christian for very long, maybe 3 years. And so that's where that whole thing of trusting God to reveal who he is in a deeper way, and that he is grace, and that he,
Mhm.
all of those things, like, I don't have to teach him that. I'm not the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, yeah. And especially if you're not in a relationship to where that's welcomed or
Exactly.
invited, you know. So
And
yeah,
that's what blows my mind about, Facebook, is that everyone thinks they have permission to say whatever they want to say to everyone else. And I'm just like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, we
Well, it's
lost
part of
all
the
manners
form.
when we got on social media.
Right. Well, the form itself just kind of creates that type of atmosphere because you're not in person, you know.
Right.
And it's the risk. It's the risk that we take by engaging and really putting ourselves out there on social media. I mean, we're definitely inviting the freedom of speech to come in and be as harsh or as nice as as they're going to be. But it can be really, really difficult to be on social media, being a public platform that it is, and be called all sorts of heinous names and be treated harshly. So
I
that's
think you
not,
and I have had a pretty good, I guess, setup where we do have people that have many different opinions about many different things, and for the most part, the debates have been pretty civil compared to what I see, like,
yeah,
out there.
right. They could be way worse. That's
Oh
true.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I have
Better,
people
Joanne.
sometimes. I'll have people inbox me sometimes, and they'll say, I really appreciate that you don't allow things to get out of hand, because if someone is starting to, insult people, call them names, and, be condescending and things like that, I'm just like, no, that's not what this is for. Like, we want to hear what you have to say, and we want to learn from you, but you have to do it in a way that honors other people.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and it's true. It's almost like, especially if you put something pretty controversial out there, you I'm now finding that I personally have to take more responsibility in monitoring closely. Um, I mean, it could take all day though. I mean, you could be on that thing all day as comments come in, and I've had to block a couple of people for that very reason. And I didn't do it soon enough because I wasn't on Facebook all day, you know, and I missed some things. But it's important to establish that because, you know, yeah, we have free speech, but I also and you also have the freedom to just be like, nope, we're not going down that road. It's not okay for you to treat people like that and name call. So this is where, you know, it ends. Um,
the
so we do
voice
have
doesn't
that
have to be
responsibility.
abusive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think we are headed in the right place with, you know, having more respectful conversations and, you know, we can lead the way in demonstrating what that looks like, you know, for people. Um, and hopefully, you know, we do a good job doing
You
that.
know what's funny is, I had a guy that I don't know at all. He's not even in my friends list, and he messaged me one day, and his he just said, "Build that wall,"
Build that wall. What?
because I had posted something that he didn't agree with about immigration. And
Wow.
he may have seen me, like, in another group that had something to do with immigration. But it was so funny because I thought, you don't know me, and the only thing you're gonna say is build that wall. Like, do you want to fight with me? Like, is that, like,
Apparently so.
what is this? And so,
Uh,
so I let it sit for a few days until, because initially I was just like, whatever. But I was like, no, I need to, if I feel led to engage with him, I need to make sure that I do it in a way that is beneficial. And so, so I waited a while, and then I went back to him, and I was like, it's really funny that you say that, because I had this conversation with Border Patrol, and they didn't even want a wall. Did you know that? And so I was
wow.
just kind of, talking to him, and so then he was like, well, this and that. And then he started saying, all this stuff, illegals this and illegals that, blah, 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 blah. And so I let him get out what he needed to say. And then my next question was, have you been the victim of a person who was undocumented? Has someone, has an undocumented person done something that either took something from you, hurt you? Because I was trying to figure out where the animosity.
Yeah, the root. What's the root?
And he said, well, yeah, I was working this job one time and my hours got cut because the boss was able to pay other people less wages to get the
Ah,
job done.
okay.
And I was like, okay. And I said, so what responsibility do you feel belongs to the boss? Because had he not offered that, that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And he was like, well, yeah, that's true. But, da, da. So we went back and forth a little bit, and the conversation was completely civil. And he shared some things, and I shared some things. And then I think we spoke like 2 different times. And then I think he blocked me.
Wow. Wow. But at least you had this opportunity, like you took the opportunity to get to the root, issue that he was having, because obviously he had very strong feelings.
Right.
You had a conversation,
And
you know.
that's something that I've actually learned from like the welcome group, because they talk about how, there are 3 different tiers of people in this group. There are very, very conservative people who have who feel compassionate towards immigrants, but they're also like, but they can't really talk about it a lot, and especially not in their social circles or their churches or even in their own family sometimes. um, and then we have like the mid person who is like, no, this is not right, we should not be treating them that way. And they might be a little more vocal, but they're not like at activist level. And
Hmm.
then we have level 3, which is like the people that are balls to the wall, they're ready to.
Yeah, ready to go.
So, it's interesting because as I call people, I never know where they are
Sure.
until we start to have the conversation, and I have to kind of tailor the way that I speak because I don't want this inflammatory
Yeah, you want
back.
a civil,
Yeah,
productive conversation.
right. My intent is not at all to upset them, but and I do want to like find out from them like what else, what can we do for you as a community? Are there resources that we can send to you? Or where are you with things? What would you like to know? Do you have questions? I had a woman who just grilled me for like an hour and a half the other day, asking
Wow.
me, well, what is DACA, and what is, and why did all those people come to the border? And she was just asking me, which was great. I mean, I loved being able to
Right. I mean,
explain
she
it
was
all to
really
her.
interested, obviously.
Well, and her heart is very soft towards migrants, but but she said, I do believe in legal immigration. I do believe that we need secure borders, and I was like, you know what? I don't know anybody that doesn't agree with that. Even like the craziest person that you think is like this way out left Democrat does not want an open border. They really don't. I don't know where that idea came from. I have a feeling, of course, it was political and it had to do with votes, but I I have never had a conversation with anyone, regardless of where they are politically, that said, let's just open the country and let everybody come in. That's ridiculous.
Wow. I mean, just hearing you say that, I just feel like there's such a difference obviously, between perception and
Mm.
what's actually true in so many things. I mean, that's a big umbrella statement, but obviously it's going to apply to this topic too. And there's,
Yeah,
like we discussed before, is a lot of ignorance concerning immigration and what's real, what's not, you know.
right.
And so, how are we supposed to make, decisions and, you know, um, know what we're believing if we don't even have true information to base it from? That makes it very difficult. And Joanne,
Right.
I'm looking at time. I want to be mindful. I know you have another meeting at 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just want to thank you so much for taking some more time to talk to me. I'm very grateful. I think all of this has just been so insightful for me just to understand, you know, more about deconstruction, obviously, and just getting to know you more, which is wonderful, and hearing your story and your passions and, where you've been and where you're going. And I just think it's exciting. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share because, like I told you, it's not like, I've been invited a couple places to like share, but of course it was definitely not the circles that I normally. In fact, I'm finding that it's more like Catholics and Methodists that are really compassionate towards people at the border and wanting to do something.
Wow.
Um, in that. And so, yeah, so I'm kind of like, it's interesting because I was in an Episcopal church
Hmm.
when I was a kid. And so I'm a little more familiar with, than I guess if I had always been in a non-denominational church, I may not feel as comfortable in those settings, but I'm okay, like either way. And so, so that's, like I said, one of those pieces that ties into where I'm at today and, what,
Yeah.
where
Yeah. Makes you
God's
who you
leading me.
are. Yep. And prepared you for what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like, okay, so now I've come like full gamut, which I just want to say this really quick. You were talking about people deconstructing, people that are in the circles that we are in online. Um, and there was one guy that I've been following probably for the past year. I think you may have too. I don't know if you've been following him for that long. But initially, when he first started the deconstruction, he was very, very angry with the church and very hurt. And so a lot of his posts were just very like, you know, we all have to wake up and realize that they've brainwashed us and we're this and that. And so, and like you were saying, that's kind of the negative side of it is just kind of navigating all the feelings that come with when you feel like things were not what they should have been, or you have been hurt or rejected or whatever. And so anyway, it's really funny because I had prayed for him like from the beginning. I just started praying for him, and no matter how like out there he got, I just knew like I had a peace, and I was like, God's got him and he's going to come full circle. And but people were dropping off of his friends list like flies. It was like
I'm sure.
they
Oh,
could not handle the stuff that he was saying. Well, at one point he even got into like he was going to do like psychedelic drugs, and he was trying to open his consciousness and all this kind of stuff. And it's so funny because I there was a time when all of that would have really freaked me out and I would have been like, oh yeah, no, I'm done. But I just happened to be in a place in my walk where I was like, okay, whatever, it's God's got him, and whatever he needs to experience and however far off you know
yeah.
out there he gets, he's never too far for God to draw him back in.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. So now I've seen where he has like come full circle and he's back with Jesus. Um and he asked me, we were having a conversation in our inbox, and he said, why didn't you ever get freaked out, you know, with like how where I was going with things? And I was like, because God wasn't freaked out.
Wow.
I was like,
So good.
yeah, I was like, I had this, I told him, I was praying for you, and, I was hoping that you wouldn't go down a path that would cost you, you know.
Right.
I
Sure.
was like, but at the same time, I understood that this is what you needed to experience to find your way back. So
And I'm sure he deeply, deeply appreciated
he
hearing
was, yeah, he was just kind of like, because he was like, you're one of the few people that have stuck with me, and I was like, well, I really don't have room to judge you like at all. I was like, I've trust me.
wow. Yeah. Well, that's amazing, and that's loving, when people go through stuff like that, for you to stick around and just pray and be available,
Right. So imagine if, like like you're saying, there are so many people that are like, oh, this deconstruction thing, it's, it's terrible and it's causing division and it's tearing up the church and this and that. And it's like, what if this was just part of their testimony? Like, what if this is just where they need to walk so that they can come back and have a greater sense of what they believe?
Yeah, and I really feel like that is a lot of people's stories. Like,
Yeah,
it's my story.
right.
You know, my
It's mine
faith
too.
is, yeah, my faith is deeper. So, you know, that's powerful. And I think we could safely attach that positivity to deconstruction.
Right. And the thing is, like before, where I felt like I had to have all the answers for everything and know exactly what I believed on, on every topic. Right now, I still don't know what I believe on every topic, but I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah. And that's huge. I mean, that alone is like tremendous. I was never okay with not having it all figured out. And the funny thing was is that I thought I did. Like I mean,
Oh,
I
I
I
did.
totally went from know it all to this is all I know, you know. That's and that's a really worthwhile journey. It really
Right.
is. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
powerful. So thank you again, Joanne.
Okay.
Really
Thanks.
appreciate it. And of course, we'll talk again, I'm sure.
Okay.
And I'll see you on Facebook
Yeah.
and in church at some point.
Right. Thanks,
All
Kat.
right. All right, take it
Yeah,
easy.
bye.
Bye.